I am ready to bring in our guests this evening and pretty excited to welcome gentlemen Brandon and Eric. Welcome to both of you.
Good evening.
So, Brandon, you come to us from Las Vegas, right? In that area?
No. Salt Lake City.
Oh, so I'm sorry, Salt Lake City. Yes,
I'm currently in my office in Salt Lake City.
Eric
is there. As you can see, Eric is ever vigilant in the command center out at the ranch.
Yeah, right at the ranch, which is pretty exciting. So I love this whole story about Skinwalker. It's such an intriguing place, first of all, and congratulations on season 3. This is exciting. You're going into season 3, and I was lucky enough to be able to have watched the premiere screener. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I'll try not to spoil anything as we go along here, as far as, because that's coming out on May 3rd. So, but Brandon, first of all, what made you decide to buy the ranch? As I said in the monologue, you were anonymous for, I think, a few years. And so I want to know what made you decide to buy it and what made you decide to finally state that you were indeed the buyer of it.
Good question. I had been involved with an advanced physics project and program back in 2010 to 2013, and our science advisory board involved a couple of individuals who, unbeknownst to me, were also the science advisors to Robert Bigelow, Bigelow Aerospace, who, of course, is the previous owner of Skinwalker Ranch. In 2015, those individuals reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in taking a meeting to discuss a potential joint venture or acquisition of this very enigmatic piece of property in northeastern Utah, not only because of my proximity to the ranch, being in Salt Lake City and just a few hours away, but also knowing that I had the resources to engage and to potentially advance what had apparently been a very active scientific investigation that between 2008 and 2013 was part of a Pentagon-funded black budget program. I agreed to take the meeting and flew to Las Vegas, met with Mr. Bigelow and advisors, and expressed interest in potentially acquiring the property. I did state that I was a skeptic. I had never seen a UFO, a ghost, or an orb, or anything of the sort, and would be acquiring the property as an open-minded but skeptical individual. And in April of 2016, acquired the property with no intention of ever revealing my identity as the owner. In fact, I thought I'd go the rest of my life without ever revealing that I was the owner of the property, simply because I didn't want it to conflict with or distract from my professional obligations as chairman of the largest commercial real estate firm in the Intermountain West, and also an entrepreneur associated with so many other enterprises and representing various companies and entities. And it wasn't until March of 2020, that I eventually came out and was public with the fact that I was the owner, had owned the property for a number of years, and agreed to enter into a deal with the History Channel to document the reality of our ongoing investigation at Skinwalker Ranch. Eric Bard, who is our principal investigator, has been involved in this effort since 2016 as well, and has quietly and vigilantly acted behind the scenes as really the one that has designed the scientific platforms and devices to document and monitor the phenomenon, the activity on Skinwalker Ranch. So we built a robust multidisciplinary team that is now captured on the History Channel series, which is an unscripted series. There is not one bit of dialogue that is scripted. They're just simply documenting and recording the unraveling, the unfolding investigation that we have ongoing. So it's been quite a journey, and it's a privilege to join you, Martin, and my associate and partner in discovery, Eric Bard.
When I was talking with Eric off air before we went live, and I think it's going to be okay that I say this, he says the History Channel's, what we see is only like 1% of what is going on. And what, of course, he's, this is he's there off and on year round. So it's a very small percentage of what actually is happening, going on there.
True. Yeah, most of it ends up on the cutting room floor, or a lot of it. Our investigation is ongoing, whether there are production professionals there to capture it or not. We try best to be collaborative, and we've used this up until this point as a vehicle to engage the public, to allow the public a peek behind the curtain, if you will, relative to the reality of our investigation and the phenomena. And so it's been an interesting journey. We have a website, www.skinwalker-ranch.com, that we've also populated with data and information that will actually allow the public to engage and provide, I think, some insider access, some behind the scenes details in the days ahead. But the History Channel has been an incredible partner, and we're very, very pleased to unveil really season 3 here on May 3rd, that presents 10 episodes documenting a large part of some of the highlights of our activity this last year.
Excellent. Eric, do you ever have any trouble sleeping there?
All the time.
Is it nerve-wracking sometimes? I mean, I've wondered that. I look at what do you call that, Homestead 3 or whatever the other property. I mean, I can't imagine like being out there and as a dare to sleep overnight in a sleeping bag or something like that. I just, I mean, what's it like there? And are you there alone a lot, or is there other people around?
Well, we do have the caretakers of the property who are generally here, but there are periods of time when they're absent. And, I have sometimes for a week or a few weeks at a time done my work more or less in isolation, with the exception of obviously there's a security presence. Mm-hmm. So, your question was whether it's off-putting or somehow daunting to be here doing this work.
Yeah.
You spoke of being there on a dare. Well, I wouldn't come here on a dare. I wouldn't spend any time out in the homesteads on a dare, not after the things I've seen. Fortunately, I'm here with a purpose.
Yeah. One of the things I think about is, the way to capture things. I know you have, and it's you, Eric, you're really involved in the technical part and the equipment and what to have out there. But is there, I had someone on my show last night that he's involved in this thing called sky360.org, which is an open source situation where they have cameras. They're going to try to get up to 150,000 cameras worldwide that are open source for people to see what's going on in the sky, basically. And it has a fisheye lens, like aiming straight up. You get the whole sky. Do you have anything at all like that aiming up?
Yes, of course.
You do.
Those are some of our most useful assets, as you'll see. Again, no spoilers, but you see it. So yeah, and I've been aware of a few efforts of the kind that you just alluded to. Really good ideas, crowdsourcing the search for data coming out of the skies, to try to document the UAP phenomenon and see if there are any correlative measurements, meaning things like magnetic fields, electric fields, anything else that we can measure when we see these things in the field of view of the cameras. And so I've been involved with a few of those. At least had discussions with. At the system level, how does that work? And, is it a good match to what we're doing here?
Well, and
go ahead,
Martin,
Brandon.
We've also had some discussion with Dr. Avi Loeb of Harvard and the Galileo project, and have offered to to establish a cooperative installation at Skinwalker Ranch to aid that effort.
Wow.
We're all about collaborating and the truth, and being able to drive not only our investigation forward, but also assist others relative to trying to document and discover the nature of the phenomena.
That was one of my questions. I was wondering, since the series started, Brandon, have you been approached by other scientists that are actually interested in doing some work there? Have you been approached like that?
Numerous. We've had numerous requests, invitations to cooperate. And I think it's important to note, and you see this manifest on the docuseries, we have had some incredible professionals come on site and collaborate with the team. Numerous third-party experts. I would dare say the leading FLIR and drone photogrammetry expert in the country, as well as other research scientists and experts engage with the team as part of this investigation. We had a professor from the University of Alabama who is skilled at weather balloon experiments, and that was a key part of some of our investigation in the past, and something that we'll be revisiting, as well as instrumented rocketry and other approaches to better understand the nature of what we're dealing with on Skinwalker Ranch. Now,
I guess this would be more or less a question for you, Eric. I'm not really sure, but and it's just your opinion. Is it possible that the ridge there might have something geologically to do with some of the things that are being witnessed there?
Martin, you're starting in exactly the same place I did. After my first visit to the property, I was absolutely convinced, there was no doubt at all, that there's something going on. And of course, my background is in physics. I'm a plasma physicist, and I am looking for the mechanism for those things that we observed. And it occurs to me that there's some really interesting stuff that can happen geologically with geophysics and atmospheric physics. I like to say nature's got talent.
Yeah.
And people smile at me when I say that, but I mean, honestly, not to take the approach not to take a dismissive approach or the approach of a debunker or anything of that nature. I want to start with things that we can perhaps more easily get our heads around, like any kind of processes that might be taking place in that mesa or even in the ground underneath the property that could generate transient electromagnetic fields, or even things like infrasonic bombardment of human beings. That's known to create some interesting sensory effects on the human observer. So your question is right on. I don't know if my answer was very good, but your question goes right to the point.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned this, the concept of maybe a reaction to being observed, that type of thing. And there's been a lot of talk. A lot of people are suggesting that it's like, I'm sure you heard of the double slit theory, where if there's observation, it changes. So you wonder if there's any difference because of the observation. Now, I understand when NIDS was there years ago that things did not happen, or, a few things happened, like the weird thing about the camera when they had all those cameras up on the poles, things like that. But still, there was silence. It went quiet. And I don't know if anyone has ever documented, that could very possibly happen again, right? It could go quiet again. Everything could go quiet.
I think the answer is certainly yes. We don't have the buttons to push or the levers to pull to coerce the phenomenology into manifesting in any given circumstance. We've been fortunate, as you see in the documentary series, that we've seen some things that are correlative with our work. Brandon and I will often recite a mantra to each other: correlation is not causation. And
indeed,
it's something that we've said to one another since 2016. Trying to maintain our grounding in the interpretation of the unusual things that happen here. But going back to your original question, Martin, it's always possible that that everything could go quiet. I think I think coming into this, we took the approach of wanting to be minimally invasive, if you will, to change the crime scene as little as possible or none at all. And so when we brought our observational tools, things like camera assets, we didn't really want to have a large electromagnetic footprint or scar up the earth or anything of that nature. And so we've been very light-handed. I think what you see during the series is a bit more aggressive and a bit more proactive. But I have to tell you, I'm getting interesting, I'll call them events, under both circumstances, both when there isn't much in the way of a human or technological presence on the ranch, as well as during our filming.
Interesting. Do you think that along those lines, that animals there make any difference, like cattle or domestic animals make any type of difference there?
I'm interested in what you mean by make a difference.
Do you think there's more activity when there's cattle there? I know that the Shermans had issues with their 2 dogs, which was terrible. And I don't know if any dogs have been out there since.
Sure.
Yep. Go ahead,
Eric.
Okay, I will. We have this wonderful black lab, William, who I think this will go to your point. This animal has been on the ranch at least since my first visit, when he introduced himself to me, and I have to tell you, sometimes it's pretty clear that the dog is sensing things in the environment, and you'll see a very abrupt change in his demeanor, in his behavior. He's generally a very gentle-natured dog, but there have been a few times when he's become aggressive, at least very, very loud, and I wouldn't say violent, but certainly I don't want to cross paths with him when he's acting like this. And it seems to be in response to something in the environment. I realize that's kind of the complimentary answer to your question. Your question was whether things like cattle actually stimulate the phenomenology. And I've just said, well, we have a dog, for example, that seems to respond to the phenomenology.
That's interesting, though.
I think it's probably fair to note that we've had incidents with animals on the property with livestock that have proven disturbing and mysterious. I mean, you saw in season 2, we brought out actually the Utah State veterinarian. The veterinarian for the state of Utah was brought out from the Department of Agriculture to inspect the site, inspect the remains of this one particular animal, this calf, and he was very disturbed. Captured on camera, with his statements, and he proceeded to have tests run on the animal to see, what would explain the bizarre lack of predator activity. And they came up with 0. They came up with no answer, which is in and of itself an answer. And we continue to see some of this manifest as part of the puzzle that we are trying to put together out on the ranch.
If I remember right, that calf was in perfect order just hours before it was found. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So that is quite the mystery. A couple of times during the show, I might pop up some chat questions. And so those of you that want to ask questions, please put them in caps. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do too much of that, but here's one here. Has anyone tried communicating with them, quote them, and how would you go about doing that if you did try to communicate? I guess there's other questions that need to be asked before that one.
That's a good question. Eric, I'll let you take it. I mean, you actually have had a firsthand experience with communication out there.
Yes. So I think we should lay the foundation for the answer. Otherwise, it's going to make very little sense. Martin, you mentioned that you had read the text that was written about the ranch by George Knapp and Colin Kelleher. In that text, you see some speculation on the parts of some who've been involved with the research that they were dealing with what they termed a sentient, precognitive, non-human intelligence. Kind of a mouthful, but basically what it means is there's some kind of intelligence here that may even know what you're going to do before you do it. Look, this wasn't my thesis. It was brought to us by those who spent more time than I so far have on this property. And your question, or the question that came in through the chat, was, has anyone tried communicating? Well, in fact, yes. And those efforts predate our presence here. Under our watch, that has been less of the emphasis. But it appears that several relatively simplistic measures were taken to elicit a response and to establish some kind of line of communication with the phenomenon on the parts of those who were here during the NIDS and Bass era.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this, and either one of you or both of you can answer this question. Do you think we have an intelligence involved here, or could part of it have some type of intelligence?
Well, it's really, really tough to make that case, to defend it. But I can say that, as after the time that I've spent either remotely engaging with the property, meaning through remote access, or being here physically, I absolutely sympathize with the perspective that there is an intelligence involved. There are some very correlative, very suggestive correlative events that have taken place, and it's extremely tempting to interpret them as being set into motion by some other, or the them that was referred to in the question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it makes me wonder some of the things that go on there. Now, I'm going to try to stay away from any spoilers on the season premiere, but I do want to talk about one thing. We don't have to go into a lot of detail, but I'd like to talk about the helicopter and the altimeter, which is really bizarre. I think one of the most interesting parts of the premiere. Because this is a very high-end helicopter with state-of-the-art equipment. And I believe it's your brother, isn't it, Brandon? That's the pilot?
So my brother is our full-time pilot, runs Aerodynamic, which is our aviation company, and is arguably one of the most skilled pilots in the country. And we have a relatively new Airbus H-130 helicopter that is equipped with the latest avionics, instrumentation, and even military grade night vision. But the radar altimeter that is on the helicopter when the men were conducting experiment above the triangle and over the property registered some very disturbing readings. In fact, it's known, it's a fact. We've documented that something was tracking with the helicopter 40, 50 feet below the helicopter, even when he was taking evasive action to try to get away from the area and try to either shake whatever was tracking with them or jostle the instrumentation, but to no avail. It was only after an extended period of time and it becoming even more troubling and a safety concern that he called off and brought up short the flight, and within seconds the radar altimeter showed that nothing was following, and whatever was there ended up disappearing and was ceasing its activity there with the helicopter. But it was baffling, and I think we bring to bear in this opening episode of the season some additional data and evidence that helps helps us understand the gravity of what we're dealing with and how real the phenomena is. This wasn't just an equipment malfunction. This was something very real. There was a very physical interaction taking place.
And something not, oh, pardon me. Go ahead.
Yeah, Eric was on board. I believe, Eric, you and was it Dr. Taylor were on board as well?
Yes.
And obviously this was not something in the visible spectrum.
No.
Well,
You couldn't see anything.
no.
Yeah, not at the time. We've reviewed surveillance footage and we've seen some interesting things, which we'll touch on in short order. But yeah, it's a continued concern.
And so, Eric, what was that like?
Well, I don't know if I was more curious or frankly more frightened by the events. Look, what happened is absolutely not what we were expecting. We came up with a flight plan of some concentric circles at various altitudes, and the intent was simply to take some measurements with our spectrum analyzer, Geiger counters, the things you see us using routinely, and see if there was any region of interest, any concentration of unusual measurements or signals. And not unlike so much of what we do here, it turns out that the intended experiment yielded very little in the way of data. For example, I had the spectrum analyzer running in the back of the helicopter, and I didn't really see anything. But again, we're looking for an RF needle in an RF haystack, right? I don't know that I was looking in the right region of the spectrum for what could have been present there in that space above the ranch. Now, there are two. I think anyone listening to this will beat me to this. There are two possible, equally plausible interpretations here. One is that we're looking at an actual return signal, that there was something 39, 40 feet below the helicopter tracking us. Mm-hmm. The other is that there's some sort of electromagnetic assault on the equipment itself, effectively spoofing that measurement. Either one of those is troubling. Either one of those is interesting. And either one of those is germane to what we're doing out here. And
there seems to be the electromagnetic thing seems to come up quite a bit when it comes to that place.
Yeah, particularly the magnetic. I don't know that I've made the case very effectively, at least in our public-facing work, but I have a very strong basis for the interpretation that there is a magnetic, what I call a magnetic fingerprint to the phenomenology. I'm not saying that anything magnetic is the root cause of it. I'm just saying that not unlike the wake of a ship or some secondary effect, there unusual events on the property do seem to be attended by magnetic transients.
Here's a question. Is actually I was going to ask a very similar question, so I thought I'd put it up there. How far from the ranch's property does the phenomenon bleed out? And mine was, I'm sure these type of things have no boundaries, like property lines. So right. What are you able to find out about how far out and around the area?
Well, it's interesting. We have the benefit of a historical record that preceded us. A gentleman who passed away, unfortunately, recently. His name is Joseph Jr. Hicks, who is a local science teacher and very respected, armchair historian, had been documenting since 1952 UFO activity and other strange events in the Uinta Basin within close proximity of the subject property. And we're talking a treasure trove of files and documentation going back to 1952 under his watch that reported phenomena that, of course, was beyond the boundaries of Skinwalker Ranch, even though he attested to the fact that he believed there later in life that there was a high frequency, for whatever reason, of activity that seemed to be centered on the property. It is a reality that people in the Uinta Basin, especially those who've been there for an extended period of time, have experienced and witnessed strange phenomena, and it isn't necessarily confined to this property.
And what about the local Native Americans? There's lore of, of course, that's where the Skinwalker, the name or the term comes from. So, yeah, what do you know about
No,
them?
for generations, tribal leaders have discouraged their people from even looking the direction of the ranch due to the belief that it is in the path of the Skinwalker, and that there's a demonic shape-shifting presence, and that there was a curse placed on the property. That's where the name of the ranch is derived from, and I would say a good share of the local community is very serious and sober-minded regarding that topic. We try to be sensitive to the cultural aspects of our stewardship. We've brought Native American leaders, spiritual leaders onto the property on several occasions. You've seen them on the docu-series that have interacted with our team on numerous occasions, and we believe that it has been important to respect the cultural traditions and the testimony and feelings of those neighbors that we enjoy a relationship with out there in the Uinta Basin.
Brandon, since you're up right now, know you've looked into this. I believe you have anyway. How long have things been documented out there? How far back have things been happening there that is documented?
Relative to the ranch, the actual property, the 512 acres that we have secure, we have documented reports going back to about 1930, so nearly 100 years of activity. Interestingly, we brought former law enforcement on the property that have provided testimony regarding events that occurred. I mean, one individual had responded to a number of very disturbing events and activity that occurred during the 1980s, long before the Shermans acquired the property. This was under the Myers family ownership that spanned decades. But the testimony of law enforcement, former family of former homesteaders that inhabited the property, all combined to create a historical record that it's both very intriguing and disturbing relative to the events that now we are documenting.
So, Brandon, in the future, let's say, congratulations on season 3. And, a lot of them never make it that, these type of shows never make it past, the first season, never mind the second and the third. So congratulations on that. But let's say down the road, say 10 years from now, do you have plans for the ranch after this whole thing is over? What is your thoughts at this point?
Well, the investigation doesn't exist because of the docu-series on television. The docu-series is merely a vehicle that we have agreed to engage in order to inform the general public and to allow them a peek behind the curtain, if you will. This is an ongoing scientific investigation. It spanned years under our stewardship before there was any docu-series or production cameras, and it'll continue, I suspect, long after. We're serious about this effort, and we believe that this is a very significant scientific endeavor.
Did Kenneth and Edith Myers ever talk about things going on there?
They did to law enforcement. According to law enforcement and other witnesses, they not only made calls and actually brought people out to document and assist them, but it was something that they experienced. I mean, unfortunately, they passed on decades ago. And so all we have is the testimony of those who interacted with them and were witness to the events that occurred on the ranch and continued to persist after property was transferred to the Shermans and ultimately to the Bigelow era ownership.
So when Terry and Gwen Sherman, when they were there in the very beginning, weren't they there with the Myers? Didn't they live with the Myers?
No.
Oh, so
no. They acquired the property through heirs, through essentially the trustee of the estate of the Myers, the former owners. They had passed, and in 1994, they had acquired the property from the heirs and ultimately sold it, by 96 to Mr. Bigelow. Mr. Sherman stayed on for a period of time and with Mr. Bigelow as part of that transition, but ultimately moved off the property. And I don't want to speak on their behalf. I want to respect their privacy, but they have not wanted to have anything to do with the property or any discussion about it. I think they attribute a lot of negative things and activity in their lives to their experience on the ranch. And so I want to be respectful of that.
Yeah, I sure understand that, especially after reading that book. But who was the one who initially said, "Do not dig here"?
The do not dig lore. Well, it goes back. I mean, it seemed to be at first a little bit apocryphal, to be honest. I haven't seen anything in the deeds, the transfer deeds that I analyzed relative to the property. But I think it's important to note that we have soils tests that have been conducted. We've had a lot of other tests even recently in the last couple of years as part of the docu-series effort that has been brought forward. Analyzing the geology of the property, and what we're experiencing. You can't go to a spot and find radioactive material on this property or any contamination. It just simply doesn't exist. That being said, we are recording and dealing with some extreme electromagnetic disturbance, radioactive energy that is transient in nature on the property. And this is the realm of Eric Bard, so I'll shut up and pass the baton to my principal investigator.
All right, Eric, you're on.
So, to the question of, if we go back to the question of digging, we've had a lot of really lively discussion and speculation about why that might have been embedded in the narrative. What could be the reason for it? And of course, it's fun to speculate. Concerning whether digging poses any particular health hazard, like what Brandon was referring to, any radioactive, exposure to radioactive things that might be kicked up in the process of digging. We've had a pretty thorough survey of the property for that type of thing, and yes, we've done some drilling, I guess, digging, and here's the interesting part. I don't want to spoil anything, so I have to figure out how to.
Sorry to interject, but it's very evident if you look at the 18 episodes that we presented to the public and what we have revealed so far, that disturbing events, strange activity appears to correlate with disturbing the earth on the property. That's a fact. That isn't something that is sensationalized or concocted. Nothing is scripted. As much as people cry foul or they think that this is a scripted exercise or Hollywood effort, it isn't. It isn't. And we have so many third-party experts that can stand witness and do actually publicly state, what they experienced on the ranch as part of this investigation. But it's a fact that for whatever reason, disturbing the earth or conducting various active experiments at times seems to not only stimulate phenomena, but also we've had some very negative things happen that have seemed to correspond with some of that activity. And I think that's a key part of our investigation, and one reason why everyone who comes on this property has to sign a liability waiver. There is danger here. And it's not only danger relative to conducting experiments or activity on the property, but also that people attest to the fact that they've been followed. There's something called the hitchhiker.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Hitchhiker phenomena.
Yeah.
People claim that that disturbing events follow them, that disturbing phenomena follows them home, terrorizes their families. I mean, we have former military operatives and officials, I mean, battle-hardened veterans who have served on this property, even Mr. Bigelow himself, that absolutely refuse to ever set foot on this property ever again.
Wow.
And it's not stated lightly. I mean, it sometimes it's in violent opposition to any physical engagement with the property because of very disturbing negative things following them.
Are you ever concerned about that yourself, either one of you?
Of course.
Yeah.
I assume you're referring to the so-called hitchhiker effect.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about trying to make a visit out there if possible.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to.
Well, I remember speaking with you about that before we began here.
Yeah.
My question to you was and is, why would you want to do that?
I don't know. Why would Brandon want to buy the place? Why would you decide to do that? You know, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
human curiosity, it's the next frontier. I mean, people from the beginning of time have always, have always had a sense of curiosity and discovery that drives them. And I think, this ranch to some degree is symbolic, and it's also a very physical place. It's for a lot of people, it's their Mecca. It's a Mecca for the paranormal, and it holds a very unique position, not only in public consciousness, but as really a living laboratory. I mean, it stands that this is the only property of its kind that has been studied and locked down for now over 25 years. And had everything from armed security officers and a security presence to scientific instrumentation and surveillance in service to trying to find out what is really happening and the nature of it.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I really can't. I mean, there are places in the world, the hotspots, so to speak, usually pertains to UFOs. You hear about UFOs, or maybe you hear about Bigfoot or something in the Northwest, Oregon or Washington State or something like that, or Pennsylvania for some reason. But you don't hear about them all together, which seems to be, I mean, just about everything you can think of has happened at the Skinwalker out there, that people have witnessed.
In many cases, it's multiple witnesses.
Right.
I mean, multiple credible witnesses with scientific instrumentation registering that there's something happening unusual, and at times acute medical episodes that appear to attend some of these events. When you combine all of those things at once, it creates a very compelling record and data set to operate from.
Would you consider it more malevolent than benevolent?
Oh, I think we're definitely dealing with what appears to be malevolent forces, as evidenced by the injuries sustained that seem to be willful or intentional. I think there have been individuals that have participated in the investigation that have found a more benevolent spirit, a more peaceful presence. And I think there's others that would attest to there being a presence, but it being more benign in nature. So I think we're interacting with the diversity of origins and agendas associated with this.
Yeah. Brandon, I know you're a very successful person. You've done very well in life, but my question is, this for you to want to, here's a question up here, first of all, that someone's asking if you could bring in more scientists and stuff like that. This is money that's coming out of your pocket. I mean, is this enough of a passion for you that, again, History Channel's long gone, you're on your own. Do you have thoughts of continuing on to try to get more and more answers as time goes on?
Sure. But I mean, 95% of my bandwidth of my time is focused on conventional business interests and very serious obligations within that
Yeah.
world. I am so fortunate to have Eric Bard as
Yeah.
our principal investigator and chief scientist that is conducting the research. We're seeking to collaborate. I mean, yeah, that was a very fair question. Are we going to bring additional? I think you see on the docuseries we brought in, beyond Dr. Taylor, we've brought in a host of scientists and experts that are experts in their field, whether that be experts when it comes to LiDAR, photogrammetry, FLIR camera systems, or ground penetrating radar, resistivity studies, even those that come on the property to test the environmental environment hazards or potential aspects. I mean, we brought in a wide range of experts, and we'll continue to do so in service to this whole exercise. But I think it's important to note that we're right now still in the early stages. We started off with this being more of an observational science enterprise, trying to number one, verify that there really was something going on that did merit the investment of not only money, monetary resources, but also time and personnel. Of course, we moved past that, and as this process has evolved, I think you can continue to see that we'll be adding and strengthening our effort. But it's a process, not an event, and some days it's incremental, and our stewardship at times I think calls for a much more measured and methodical approach, as opposed to just going great guns into this. I think to a degree we want to be respectful of the environment, and we want to be sensitive to what really is truly going to yield the right type of data and results. Eric, what would you like to add anything to that? I'm sorry to take up all the time here.
Oh, not at all. I guess it's worth mentioning that during the NIDS and BAS era work, there were plenty of advanced degree wielding scientists brought onto the property or brought into contact with the data coming off of the property. And I want to tread lightly and to be respectful, but I will say this concerning the handoff. I think you know where I'm going with this, Brandon.
Yep.
Stop me if this doesn't feel right. But at the time that Brandon took over the property, and there was some briefing that took place, I have to tell you that the scientific or the informational deliverables that came out of that briefing were sparse at best.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah.
And look,
not only was it sparse, but to interject, we didn't even have connectivity that would support the platforms that you need in order to conduct a program like this. We had to run power. I mean, just the infrastructure requirements alone in order to establish the appropriate scientific platforms and capabilities on the property. I think people have no idea, and they underestimate what it has required as far as financial investment and also time and attention in order to lay a proper foundation, because we inherited merely a narrative. We didn't really inherit a foundation or a robust technology platform or a system or even data. I bought the property essentially as is, with the understanding that we were opening a new chapter, and I was okay with that. I accepted that the handoff would occur without the benefit of that data or more robust engagement or collaboration, and I'm thankful for it, to be quite candid. It gave us a clean slate. I think allowing us to enter this as healthy skeptics without being front-loaded with potential, data or information that would have potentially distracted away from what we needed to do in order to advance the program to where we are today. I think all of that needs to be taken into account.
I was wondering how you felt about that, and that you weren't handed off any of that. And I realized some of it was,
Okay.
government, and maybe some of it was even classified. But
Yeah.
but also, has anyone from NIDS ever, which stands for National Institute for Discovery Science, I think, but has anyone from that visited the ranch since you've owned it?
You bet. We've actually had a very open dialogue. It's been somewhat one way at times, but and that's not a criticism. It's just we're independently advancing the program, but we have great respect for our predecessors, and we've been fortunate to have a number of them come back to the property, engage with the team, and provide thoughtful feedback and perspective. And we're thankful for that. I'm thankful for Robert Bigelow. I have to applaud his efforts. I think it took a lot of courage for him to not only go public with the fact that he was interested in these topics, but also putting his money where his mouth was and funding research, delving into these areas. I have nothing but respect for those who have gone before us, and I hope that our stewardship and our effort is a fitting tribute and advancement to what the fuse that was lit, if you will, decades ago.
I like when you use the word stewardship, because that's all we really do in life. Is, we may own a property, but it's just a little segment of time, and time moves forward. And yeah, we are taking care of these things as it moves through time.
Well, and Martin, we're not in control. Let's just be candid. I mean, whatever we are dealing with is 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of us.
Right.
If we happen to get even the tiniest bit full of ourselves and think that we are in any way control of our environment, and fail to recognize the magnitude of what we're dealing with, the advanced physics that is obviously at play, I think we seem to be quickly reminded and humbled.
Right. I'm going to try to pop up a couple of questions here. We only have
Bring it on. Bring on the
about
question.
6 minutes. Now, I think this was in season 1, perhaps. Didn't you find a cave or something? Wasn't there something they found on the ridge?
We found a void. We're actually, you'll see this effort continue to evolve. We are, I think, responsibly testing and delving into this, literally and figuratively. Do we have any definitive conclusions of, we're reserving some of the key insights that we've gained over the course of the last few months, and we are planning a number of additional activities moving forward. Did that sum it up, Eric?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, sure.
So,
but to the question of have we found a cave, as Brandon has indicated, we found things, we found voids, but nothing that would compare to what we think of when we think of a big, big cave. Like, I'm from Kentucky, I'm not far from Mammoth Cave, nothing like that.
Yeah.
These are the cave systems that we have in the Mesa. While you can climb into them and they're very real, are dangerous and in some cases shallow or very narrow. And so we're having to use instrumentation and great care in exploring and really analyzing what we're dealing with. So that's to be continued, and we look forward to revealing some key insights in the weeks ahead.
Now, I think I know the answer to this a little bit, but is the Utah state government still showing interest in the investigation?
Well, yes. The Utah State Attorney General, Sean Reyes, has asked repeatedly for a follow-up briefing, and will be engaging with the team, I suspect, in the very near future. I've kept him posted, on how things have progressed. Episode 1 on May 3rd that is about to air will show that there really has been an elevated interest from government officials, and I don't want to say anything further other than I think people will be surprised. This isn't something you just conjure up or fabricate. I mean, this property is a place of interest, and what we're dealing with is serious. And it rises, it goes far beyond the state, and it goes to the federal level.
I may have something to add to that, Brandon.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Some late breaking news, I suppose. Today at 12:43 p.m., we had a Black Hawk flying at about 1,000 feet above the property doing circles.
Wow.
I'll show you the data later, Brandon.
Who is it registered to? Who is it registered to?
Army.
Really? Now that's interesting.
Yeah. So of course I've got the data. Fortunately, this is an example of an aircraft that was transponding, so I could identify the thing. And of course, it shows up in our surveillance footage. And we'll review it, Brandon. But this goes to the question of, is there interest in the property? Well, that circle that you see on the map wasn't throughout the entire basin. It was right over this property. I'd love to know why. I'd love to know why that happens. That's not a first. It's something that happens a few times a year.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what motivates it.
There's a lot going on. So the answer, simply put, Martin, is hell yes.
Well, this has been a real interesting show, and we had a lot of questions. I'm sorry. Let's see. I know people are asking different things, like Bob Bigelow. You already said he doesn't even want to step foot on the property.
No.
Do you ever have to call him about? I mean, I don't know what it's. No, he's completely out of the picture. Yeah.
We've kind of grown up. As much as we appreciate the efforts of those who came before us, we're kind of in a different level relative to the resources that we're deploying, the instrumentation, and frankly the effort. I'm not troubling Mr. Bigelow, and although I'd welcome any collaboration, I think he's the reason why I chuckle is he's busy right now positioning to be the real estate developer of space. And I kid you not. I mean, Robert Bigelow is a visionary. He has his beam module currently up on the International Space Station. He's the only entrepreneur on the planet that has his own space stations in orbit. He has so many other things going on. I think he's quite pleased with how we're handling our stewardship of the property, and we're excited to continue to reveal what we are learning to the public, which is a very different scenario compared to the past. I don't want to belabor this, but we have been more transparent, more collaborative, more engaged with the public relative to the phenomena and what is happening with our investigation than any other investigation that I'm aware of. Period. Show me another effort. Show me another effort that is actually opening their doors and engaging the public, and another individual like me, or even our principal investigator, that has been willing to put their reputations on the line and be open and directly communicative with the public. Good luck.
Yeah. No, very good point. And I was thinking when you were talking about Bigelow, I wonder what it would happen if he was the one that bought Twitter.
Yeah.
Instead,
I think Mr. Bigelow could care less what the public thinks, and that's
exactly
over the decades. He pretty much
exactly as much.
Yeah, he pretty much. And this isn't a criticism; it's just a statement of fact. He could care less what people wanted. Everyone would cry for more information and data, and he pretty much met that with silence. And I think we're demonstrating the opposite. And again, that's not an indictment of Mr. Bigelow. I think he had his reasons, and I respect them. and I respect him immensely. But we are trying to advance this in a different direction, and I hope that people are gaining something from it.
Yes. Well, it's very enjoyable, and it's been a real enjoyable night. History's the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch returns for season 3, Tuesday, May 3rd at 10 p.m. ET.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.